can you catch us all up to speed? Who are you? Where are you from? What's your favorite color? All that good stuff.
Yeah, so thank you for having me. My name is Leisha. As you mentioned, I'm originally from Florida, so Northern Florida in Pensacola. Grew up there, went to Duke for undergrad. Go Blue Devils for anybody who's listening. I know that you're a Wake Forest grad, but it's okay. I won't hold it against you. And so I went to Duke for undergrad. And then after that, I moved to DC and did some really cool things. I was working on Capitol Hill, worked for the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, spent some time in private equity, got a master's degree in public health. So a little bit of everything. And then after that, I went to the University of Florida, back where I'm from, go Gators. And I went there and went to medical school. And then I went into residency. And now I'm here in Atlanta at Emory. Soon to graduate. And after this, I will be heading to LA to do sports medicine fellowship. So long-winded journey, but here I am.
You're going to be sports medicine fellowship with LeBron, right?
Well, that's the hope. But yes, with the Lakers. So it's going to be so exciting. I can't, first of all, what? This is insanity. As a sports fan, I'm like freaking out right now. I'm like, okay, I have to be their doctor and not their fan. This is going to be craziness, but very excited. Yes. Go UCLA Bruins. So excited.
I personally think you should do both. You should be their fan and their doctor and the doctor fan.
I don't know how I get fired.
Yeah, no, you won't. They'll love you. But, I actually didn't know that, Leisha. So, in terms of I knew about the Florida connection from your training, but I didn't know you're from there. So I'm originally from Florida too. And so I'm from just outside Ocala, Crystal River. That's what it's called.
I know exactly where that is. That's crazy. I did not know that. Wow. Okay.
Small world. So we're learning all sorts of new stuff about ourselves already. So, we all kind of have this, origin story, if you will. And so how did you get involved in personal finance? Like a lot of people listening, they know about my disability insurance debacle and like the student loan mistakes that I made. And I'm just kind of curious about what sparked your interest in personal finance, and particularly given that like you're a really busy resident during training right now and you're about to go into fellowship in LA. So what got you interested in personal finance, and how did you fit that in while you're in training?
Yeah, so it's an interesting story. I will say I always had an interest in finance and in math. I just kind of that was my favorite subject in school as I was growing up. And so that was my natural inclination. And then a lot of people in my family do business and finance. And so it was a path that I was introduced to from an early age. But I will say there were two main events that really sparked my interest in personal finance. The first one is when I was an undergrad. I went to Duke, as we talked about, and I didn't grow up poor. I didn't grow up rich. But when I was at Duke, I really saw what wealth was. And to be honest, it was something that I didn't have that I really wanted. I saw people taking fancy vacations that I didn't take. I saw that people went to private high schools that I didn't get access to. And I saw the opportunities that they got. And I thought to myself, wow, that's something I really want. And so when I was an undergrad, I got hooked up into Duke's Financial Educational Partnership. And what that was a program at the time that had a goal to bring more females and more Hispanics and minorities onto Wall Street. And so through that program, I got introduced to the world of investment banking, the world of sales and trading. And I will tell you, as a 21 or 22-year-old, when you're, getting offered a job that pays you six figures right out of undergrad, it's very enticing. And so even though I had this interest in medicine, even though I knew that I wanted to be a doctor, I really was strongly considering a career on Wall Street. And through that educational partnership, I had mentors on Wall Street. I had mentors at Barclays Capital and Goldman Sachs and JP Morgan and Trace. And so I was flying back and forth to New York quite often when I was a junior at Duke. Ended up not pursuing a career in Wall Street, partly because I didn't want to wake up every day knowing that my primary purpose in life was how I was going to make a firm more money. But in the back of my mind, I still knew that I wanted to build wealth. I still knew that I wanted this life that I didn't have growing up. And so I moved to DC. I worked in public policy. I worked at the Center on Budget and Policy Priorities, and really kind of got this mix of public policy, health policy, and finance. And it was really interesting to me. Ended up going to medical school and really thought that I was going to leave that part of my life behind. And the other thing that sparked my interest in personal finance was medical school, actually. And it wasn't going to medical school. It was when I decided to go into family medicine. And I know that I'm talking a lot, but this was actually probably one of the critical moments of my life. Was I knew that I wanted to go into sports medicine, but what I didn't know was, what route am I going to take? Am I going to go through primary care sports medicine, or am I going to go through orthopedic surgery? And I really had to have this like come to Jesus moment because I didn't like orthopedic surgery as much. I really liked family medicine. I thought that it fit my personality better. It was going to allow me to use my master's in public health, my degree in public policy. I liked everything about family medicine. But I was scared to make that decision. And part of the reason was because I knew family medicine was on the lower end of the totem pole when it came to pay. And it was like, wow, I just gave up this 6-figure job on Wall Street. I gave up this, job in private equity. I decided to take out all these loans for med school. And now I'm choosing a specialty that like pays on the lower end of the pay scale. Like that doesn't make sense. And so I was literally freaking out. And I had this conversation with my dad, which I will never forget. But he was like, you know what, Alicia, at some point in your life, you're going to have to define success for yourself. You're going to have to choose what you want to do. You're going to have to do what makes you happy. And if family medicine is what makes you happy, if primary care is what makes you happy, then do that. And I can teach you how to invest. Do that, and you can learn how to build wealth. Do that, and you can learn how to pay off your student loans. And so this is a very long-winded story of
Perfect.
why I got into it. And so, yeah, that's kind of what kicked everything off.
It sounds like you got a pretty wise dad. It's interesting. It's not going to be the order in these podcasts that come out, but I just got done recording a podcast where I talk about exactly that. And one of my biggest struggles is, like the idea of what does success look like to me? Like not what does success look like to someone else, but what does it look like to me? And so when your dad provided that clarity, Alicia, what does success look like for you? Like you're going to have to define that. That is a tremendous amount of wisdom.
Yeah. I mean, me and my dad are very close. I don't like to give him too much credit because he reminds me of it all the time, but, no, I mean, it was so timely. And for me, success has changed as I've grown, and as I've gone through training. But for me, especially as a female, right? It's me being able to have a fulfilling career, but also have this family and be able to spend time in both. And not feel like I have to sacrifice one for the other. So that's a huge part of success. Another part for me is having the money and the financial stability to be able to work part-time, to be able to take my family on these vacations that I didn't have growing up, to be able to send my kids to schools that I wasn't able to go to growing up. And so for me, that's a huge part of success. And then it's also setting my family up so that they can continue that. So making sure that my kids are able to build wealth, making sure that my friends' kids and, my colleagues have the tools and the ability to create the life that they want as well. So
yeah. I love it. Your mission and mine are on the same path, which is why I think this is going to work out so well. But so inside MDFU, obviously people are going to get to know you really well. And MDFU is going to be opening up in June. Super excited about that. But one of the things when we first started having conversations that made me realize just how awesome of an asset you'd be for that is you have this really big interest in student loans in particular. And so you've talked about wealth, generally speaking, and the things that you hope it provides for you and for your family and for your future. But when it comes to student loans, you kind of have a particular interest. So what created that interest? Where did it come from? Like what's the background on your student loan kind of knowledge base, which is massive?
Well, it starts by I have a lot of them. So, it's really interesting because people will say, oh, Alicia, you know so much about finance and money. And it's like, yes, but I also have debt and I am like very motivated to pay it off. I don't know what it is, but something about having debt and owing people something just doesn't sit right with me. I don't like it. And so, when I chose family medicine, I was like, shoot, I might get paid 200, maybe 220, 230 a year. And I have more than that in student loans. So it was like, I really need a student loan plan. This whole, like, maybe I'll pay it off, maybe I won't, like that just was not an option for me. And so for me, I was like, okay, I need to learn about all of the student loan plans. I need to learn about all of the programs. And also, is there a way that I could get this forgiven and not have to pay it back myself? Let me learn all about those ways. And so in doing that, I, was reading a lot about the plans. I was talking to a lot of my friends about the plans. And what I realized is that you really needed to crunch the numbers. There were certain plans that seemed similar that had little nuances that I had to really delve into. There were certain situations that would make one plan better for one person versus another plan better for another person. And so I had to really learn what that is because I wanted to make sure I chose the right one. I recognized that if I chose the wrong plan, it could cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars extra in payments or in interest. And so it was like, oh shoot, I really need to get this right. And we'll talk about it in MDFU, but all my troubles with the public service loan forgiveness program and like calling the loan servicers and knowing more about my loans than they did, and having to educate them while I was also on the phone. So it's been very interesting. But I will say, through all of that, I've learned quite a bit about student loans.
I think student loans are one of those examples. There's a few things, I don't know, 5 or 10 things in personal finance where, like, if you make a mistake with them, it's going to cost you a very large 5-figure and possibly 6-figure number. And being in the wrong student loan plan is definitely one of them. Not getting disability insurance, and if you get it, getting the right kind, or getting denied, or there's just a certain number of things in personal finance that really cost you a massive amount of money if you don't get it right. And student loans is definitely one of those things. I can't tell you how many people, because there are websites that exist where you can refinance your loans, and obviously the big conflict for those websites, right? And we have student loan refinancing on the Philosopher, and the big conflict is if they don't tell you that, like, hey, if you refinance, you can never go back. You can never have those loans forgiven. And you have these sites that, like, the only thing they tell you about is like the best interest rate you can get if you refinance right now. And it's like, yeah, but you just burned the bridge for public service loan forgiveness. And so, yeah, I completely agree with you that the need to figure that out and individualize it for you, because it is different for everybody. I think that's, and it makes sense that the reason you started getting into that is because you had a lot of loans. I think that's how most of us learn about this stuff, right? I learned about it because I got hosed by a disability insurance agent, and now I know a lot about disability insurance, even though I never sell it and can't get it myself.
Man, well, we have to talk about our disability insurance stories, because let me tell you, I learned a lot when I was also purchasing disability insurance.
We'll save that one for another episode, because you and I are going to be talking about all these different kind of personal finance topics every other week. So as people start learning about that, disability insurance episodes is definitely going to be in the mix. So, well, you probably don't know this. I went through the trouble of doing this survey, doing this study on student loan literacy at Wake Forest. We surveyed all the residents, all the fellows, got like a 35% response rate, and which for a single institution is actually pretty good. And went through all this trouble, like publishing the paper. And it was really interesting because we would submit this to papers, like we'd submit it to Medical Education and other journals like that. And the reviews we'd get back were like, hey, this is a really, really well done study, but we just don't think that residents and fellows can, really do anything to impact their personal finances when they're in training, because they don't make enough money. And for me, and I know for you, when I got that review back, and basically what it told me is that they couldn't find anybody that was actually an expert who happened to be a doctor that was a reviewer for these papers. It was hilarious because you and I both know that you can make really meaningful changes. So I'm guessing that you kind of feel the same way, because you created awesome resources at Emory, some of which I checked out on their website. They're there. You can check them out too, during your time as a family medicine resident. So what would you say to the residents and the fellows who are listening right now, who feel like they have this idea that there's nothing that they can do during training that will really move the needle for their personal finance situation? Like, why does personal finance matter for those that are in training?
Because it can shape the entire trajectory of your life. Like, I don't want to like freak people out, but I truly believe that the things that you do when you're in training and the first few years out of training can shape the entire trajectory of your life. And I totally agree with you. There are a bunch of things that you can do, especially when you're in training. And as you talked about, I was motivated to create a personal finance guide for Emory residents and fellows that's on the GME website, because I was so passionate about this topic. There are a lot of mistakes that folks make in training, and it's not that they're intentional mistakes. It's just, you just didn't know any better. No one told you, or there was this prevailing belief that you couldn't do anything to impact your situation. And I think that that's false. And so I've really been passionate about writing blogs and articles and creating guides for folks so that they are educated on these things and they know what they should and shouldn't be doing, or at least have some general advice while they're in training.
Yeah. And we'll make sure that we link to that guide that you created on the Emory GME website, and Emory will wonder why they get so much traffic coming their way after we do that. But I'm kind of curious. So, you've spent this time figuring out your student loan situation, putting these guides together for other people, that are in training, trying to make, smart financial decisions. And on the other side of that, and interestingly, one of the things people love listening to on podcasts are about mistakes, because people love learning from mistakes, right? So what would you say are some of the biggest mistakes that you see doctors make when they're in training when it comes to student loans?
The first thing is putting their loans into forbearance. So choosing not to do anything with their student loans. So that would probably be one of the biggest mistakes. Text messages. But yes, putting their loans into forbearance, and then I would say not doing anything with their student loans, not knowing that they should consolidate.
You'll have to silence that.
How? Okay. Pause.
Sorry, Nathan, we're gonna take a break for a second. So
I don't know how to do it. Is it focus? You don't have a Mac. Darn it.
I don't have a Mac. But there's a notification center of some kind on there, right? Yeah, if you put the focus mode on, it won't ding.
You say that now, and then it's gonna ding again. Okay.
If it dings again, we'll figure it out. What's that?
It's on Do Not Disturb now. I just put on Do Not Disturb.
Okay. All right. So let's try this again. I'm going to ask you the same question again, and then let's start from there. And then Nathan, you just go back to edit that out, please, if you would. All right. It's all right. It's how you learn. Don't sweat it. All right. So 3, 2, 1. All right. So we talked about student loans, and we talked about, the ways you learned about that and creating the guides at Emory to help people make the right decisions. But a lot of people love hearing about the gory details of people making mistakes. So what would you say are some of the biggest mistakes that you see doctors make in training when it comes to student loans?
Okay, there are a few. One, not doing anything because they see the bill and they're like, I'm just going to ignore this and hope it goes away. Wrong. Another mistake is putting their loans into forbearance, right? So they're like, oh my goodness, the bill is too large. There's no way I could afford this. Can someone just stop the payments? What do I have to do? Oh, you can put your loans into forbearance. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. Mistake number 2. Mistake number 3 is choosing to refinance their loans before they really know if they are going to qualify for public service loan forgiveness. So maybe they went to one lecture one time by some ill-informed doctor or finance person or representative from a private company who said, you have a really high interest rate. You should refinance your loans. And so they go, oh, okay, I'm going to do that. And then they no longer qualify for public service loan forgiveness. So those would be the main 3. And then the other one is just choosing the wrong plan. So maybe they didn't put their loans into forbearance. They didn't refinance, but they didn't know what plan to choose. And they happened to choose the wrong one. So that's another one. And then forgetting to recertify their income. I could go down the line, but for the main ones, are not doing anything with their student loans, putting it into forbearance and refinancing before they really should. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I think it's interesting watching that happen, and I agree with you. I think one of the most common one, it's not the biggest one, but the most common one that I run across that like just pains me is when people are in the wrong program. Like I still remember this is like maybe 6 months ago. And I was like pre-oping a patient for like surgery. And one of the general surgery residents, one of the chiefs came down and sat next to me. And he's like, hey man, I read your book. And I'm like, oh, sweet. Hopefully, you didn't think it was terrible. And he's like, no, actually I thought it was really helpful. He's like, but it did make me really sad. And I was like, why did it make you sad? And he's like, well, because I realized that I'm a single resident and I should probably be in revised pay as you earn right now. And when I did the math on how much money that would have saved me, he's like, it's probably $30,000 or $40,000 during my general surgery residency. And like, just to like blow people's minds a little bit, right? It's like a $20 book that would have saved this person $40,000 during their 5 years. Right. And so people are like, oh, I'm just going to go and, I'm going to learn all this stuff on my own. You 100% can do that. And I am a big advocate for people, arming themselves with information and learning stuff. But like, sometimes you're so busy in training, learning your trade. You're like, man, it'd be really great if someone would just distill this information for me in a way that like, I could just, take it in, bite-sized form. And it always hurts me when like I find someone in that situation who is in the wrong program. They could have been right now, obviously not as big of a deal because there's 0% interest on student loans. And like, I totally get that. But back then, the resident had like 3 years of training that wasn't the case. And so, yeah, there is, like you're alluding to, a whole host of things that you can do wrong. But, I'm curious about your thoughts on public service loan forgiveness. So when I give lectures on student loans, I get asked all of the time. They're like, well, I hear what you're saying about student loan forgiveness, and I don't really think it's going to be around because I see these things and like, these different presidential budgets or, that goes through Congress and they're voting on like maybe getting rid of it or doing away with public service loan forgiveness. And things have changed a little bit with, interest rates being 0% and kind of getting kicked down kick down the road, and people talking about kind of forgiving some debt. But I'm just curious to your take. I know what I tell people, but I'm curious about what your take is about what you think will happen to PSLF. Will it be around? What do you think people should be worried about? Should they be worried about anything at all? Like, what are your thoughts in that arena?
Yeah. So let me first say, I don't have a crystal ball. I cannot read the future. So there is a good, there is a chance I could be wrong, but here are my thoughts. Cause you asked, I do think the program is going to stick around, actually. And if you had asked me this question a few years ago, I would have said, I'm not quite sure. So I think the general advice a few years ago was that a lot of people were not getting their loans forgiven through this program. So it was like, wow, maybe this is something that you can't rely on. Maybe you should sign up for this program because the chance of it working out, I mean, the benefit is just so great. But then maybe you should save a little bit of money on the side, invest a little bit of money on the side, just in case this program doesn't pan out. Now you have the money to pay back your loans. And so that's what I would have told people a few years ago. But now, I think if the coronavirus pandemic and all of these waivers has shown us anything, it's that the government is really more passionate about this program than I initially thought. I mean, a few years ago, it was like poorly run. No one knew much. A lot of people weren't getting their student loans forgiven. Now they've like revamped the studentloan.gov website. Now they've got all of these help tools. And it was really interesting because during the pandemic, when they paused the student loan payments, they said, hey, we're going to pause it, but these payments are still going to count. And so that to me told me that they were at least thinking about this program. Now, I do think that once they see a bunch of doctors getting $300,000 of student loans forgiven, they might be like, we probably should cap this. And so if I had to predict anything, I would be that I think in the future, there's going to be a cap on how much gets forgiven. But I believe in the program right now. I mean, it's interesting. There are these different Facebook groups for folks who have student loans, and you're seeing left and right, folks are getting their student loans forgiven. And even recent weeks, there's been a lot of waivers. There's been a lot of news that has come out about student loans, and you've seen them close some of these loopholes. You've seen them kind of correct a lot of the problems with the program in the past. And now even more doctors than before are getting their student loans forgiven. And so this is a very long-winded way of saying that I do believe a lot more in the program than I used to. And, we can talk about at some point how when I tried to sign up for the program, I had a whole host of issues. And I wrote this article that I published on all of the trouble that I had with public service loan forgiveness. But now, that they're changing things, I'm a lot more optimistic than I used to be.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting topic because, as you alluded to, the caveat of crystal balls not being in our presence, and not having one that functions at least. Like the promissory note that exists that promises that the government is going, like it literally says that public service loan forgiveness exists and this is an option to you. And so for me, like I would even take it a step further and say, if they ever did cap something, it probably is going to impact the people that are in medical school right now and not the people that are already making payments or, they're already in residency, they're already attendings. And they're making payments on this stuff. I don't think that it's necessarily, I think that those people would be grandfathered in to, the rules that currently exist. Now, at some point they may have on the promissory note up to, right? That language may end up falling in there, but I think that'll impact the students that are coming into medicine that aren't in medical school necessarily right now, and or residents, but who knows? Like, it's the government, they can do whatever they want. And so it's like you said, like there's no way of knowing for sure, but based on the information we have out there, like I agree with you. I think it makes a lot of sense that it's going to continue. So, so we've talked about building wealth, kind of generally speaking. We talked about student loans. So outside of student loans, just for those that are curious, what they might be learning from you on these podcast episodes or inside of Medical Degree Financial University, what are some of your other personal finance favorites, like your other topics that you like?
Yes. So one is defining success for yourself. So anytime that I start a new coaching program or, I'm lecturing to residents or I'm giving a keynote talk, one of the things that I always talk about is defining success for yourself, because I think that it's one thing for me to tell you what I think you should do or give you advice based on my own personal circumstance, but everyone's different. Everyone's got different goals. And the route that you take to get there is really going to be contingent on what your end goal is. And so I always talk about defining success for yourself and making a plan for your life. And so I love doing that. I love talking about disability insurance, which I know is not a sexy topic, but I remember distinctly all of the little nuances that I learned about disability insurance when I purchased it, that trust I never thought that I wanted to learn or never thought that I could learn. Like, it was just a whole thing. So disability insurance, I talk about life insurance because I think it's one of those things that residents get sold all the freaking time. And even attending doctors get sold all the freaking time. And I, as you can tell, have strong opinions. And so life insurance is one of those things. I also like to talk about investing, and I know that can get a little murky. I'm not a financial advisor, don't want to be. I don't have any plans to manage anybody's assets or anybody's money. But I think knowing the basics of investing, knowing the difference between a stock and a mutual fund, knowing what a target date fund is, understanding the difference between a Roth IRA and a 403B or a 401A, and like, what the heck are all these acronyms and letters and numbers and what does it mean? So I love doing that. I love teaching folks how to invest. And then one of the things that I've really gotten passionate about lately, as if that weren't enough, is contracts. Oh my goodness. I am all about creating your ideal life, because I feel like, as a resident, you want more money, and as an attending, you want more time. And one of the key points in your life where you can merge both of those things is negotiating a contract, and negotiating an attending contract that pays you what you're worth and that gives you the free time that you desire. And so for me, contract negotiation and the ins and outs of that, and understanding a non-compete and what's a sign-on bonus and it's really a loan, and negotiating salary and vacation time and getting this 4-day work week if you want that. But a lot of the nuances of contract negotiation has become a new passion of mine. So that's a little sprinkle, I guess.
Yeah, no, I love it. I think that each of those sound like a wonderful podcast episode too. So I think a lot of you will be enjoying some of the conversations that we have together on these topics. And, as I mentioned, kind of in the introduction of the show, we're going to be alternating these money episodes with mindset episodes. That's really what we do, at the Physician Philosophers, money and mindset. Those are the two things, right? So Dr. Taylor, Leisha, so good to have you on the show. Thank you so much for sharing your journey with us and letting people get to know you a little bit. I can't wait to do more episodes with you.
Thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure. I'm looking forward to it.